So basically what I want to do in this session, hold on please. Is have an open discussion about how student learning outcomes and student and service area outcomes may integrate. Places where they may integrate on our campus and support each other across campus. For instance, on my college campus, we instituted a few years ago something called the first year experience. And in that first year experience, there are faculty teaching courses, and in the classrooms themselves, there's usually a counselor available. So that there's a space on campus where they actually physically combine. Since COVID, we've had some interesting things occur. I'm sure that other colleges are doing this as well. Specifically, we've had things like embedded librarians inside of our Canvas courses. Some classes have also had embedded counselors inside their Canvas courses. And these are very specific ways, let's say, in which faculty and counselors can work together to support students. But what I want to know is what else is being done across our state to integrate SLOs and SAOs, if it's even possible. And another thing that I keep running up against, at least at Sacramento City College, which is where I'm the student learning coordinator, is funding. There's all these wonderful ideas when it comes to providing support for our students in this fashion, but there's no way to pay for it. One of the things that I'm currently working on is trying to build a mentorship program that would end at the end of the first year experience and then extend into the second or third year as necessary. And the students would be collected into pods, basically. And these pods would be supported directly by a faculty member and a counselor and a support staff. These pods would ideally exist across the college in every department, in every discipline. And it's a really wonderful idea, but I keep getting stuck on funding. How are we supposed to? It's not a sustainable model. I've been able to implement this model in the English department a number of years ago because I had a sabbatical that I used, a partial sabbatical that I used in order to help fund that, let's say. But again, it's not a sustainable model. So number one, what ways are SLOs and SAOs working together across our state? Are there other specific examples of how this can be done? That's the first thing I'd like us to talk about. And then second, what are your funding situations? And can you recommend something to me and to this group as to how to accomplish these goals? Let's just start with number one. Does anybody have any specific examples of how student learning outcomes and service area outcomes are being delivered in the same space?
Well, I think I can start. I'm Veronica. I teach at De Anza in the English department, and but I think you're right, Steve. I think it's the system, the way the college is the way the college operates and is systemic, because what we have, and I don't know of other, it's a little odd, but I don't know if other colleges have this model, but more than 10 years ago, well, no, yeah, I guess about 10 years ago, they decided to integrate, they call them embedded counselors. They decided to integrate the counselors into the divisions. So there's a lot of critique about that in and of itself, because basically the general counseling became a very much smaller department, still serving students. And then each division got, we have 4 counselors that we work with. So because of how it's how these counselors are embedded into the division, we're able to work with them quite closely. And so that is their job, to work with us. I think the big glitch right now is that because we're no longer supposed to offer any pre-level English classes, the counselors were supposed to work with our lowest performing students to help them and offer support services. And that was in conjunction with the English instructors. And now that we've been told by the state that we whittled down our pre-transfer level English courses to just a few. I'm sure you're all doing the same thing. We teach 1A with extra support. And then another one, we call it the stretch. It's a 1A that's given in two parts, part A, part B, and then you get the 1A credit. Anyway, that complicates things, because we won't be able to, my understanding from the state chancellor's office is we won't be able to offer any of those courses. So now we're trying to figure out how our counselors can work with us and still with those students that need the most help. So that's kind of our dilemma. And it's a response to your question. I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for, but.
Actually, Veronica, if I can follow up and ask you a couple of other things here, because I think you brought up something really important, the idea of embedded counselors inside of divisions. I've been trying to, I sort of introduced that idea to my campus a few years ago, and it didn't really take off, mainly because the counselors didn't want to move. They didn't want to change what they were doing. That's not to say that the counselors at SCC are unwilling partners. They were very much willing partners, but they didn't necessarily want to change their profession and become attached to divisions. One of the things that I was hoping our college would consider is actually moving counselors to the different buildings on campus and having them work from those buildings, which correspond to different divisions, let's say across our campus, instead of all being in the same location in counseling. That too was met with, no, that's not going to happen. So I think that having counselors on site, having them in a classroom setting, having them embedding them in the fashion that you're doing is actually a good practice. But I'm having difficulty making that manifest on my campus. Any other ideas regarding SLOs and SAOs being delivered in the same space?
I do want to add that prior to the counselors just moving into the divisions, and now they're supervised by division deans, and that has its own sets of problems, because they're not supervised by a counselor or someone with that background knowledge, which is kind of I've always thought that was a little quirky and problematic in its own regard. But to answer, we also have before, when the counselors just had their own counseling unit, we had classes, and so they were counseling classes, 1, 2, 3 unit, small, we're a quarter system, but anyway, small unit classes that were taught alongside kind of like it was a learning communities cohort. So you had your counseling class that taught study skills, or that taught career life planning, along with English 1A, along with whatever program we were in. But that's how we were able to work together. So the team of faculty members work together with the same group of students. So that's another thing that we're still doing that, actually.
Yeah, learning communities are excellent ways to support this work. Tina, please.
Okay, so we have counselors that aren't embedded, and I'm from Taft College. Everybody, hello, my name's Tina. And we have counselors that are assigned to each discipline. So that counselor then is supposed to be an expert within that discipline. So I teach history. So if I have a student that I know is on a specific track to go to a CSU or a UC, then they meet with their history counselor. And then the counselors also inform us on what information or what courses should be offered for the upcoming semester. So we're a small college, it works well for us. So if we needed to offer a class that I know somebody's graduating, then we could do a small class or do independent study if that student missed it in the rotation. So we work closely with our counselors to ensure that students are completing their coursework, but also that we're offering courses that are off cycle. But to your question, Steve, about student area outcomes and student learning outcomes, our campus is barely starting to have that conversation. And we're starting to write area outcomes more within that space. And then we're trying to see if there's any overlap between area outcomes and learning outcomes in the classroom. I think the last Friday talk that Yarick had was really helpful, because it was like, you know how when you take chemistry and you're like, oh, I don't know how to balance equations. Then the one day it snaps. You're like, oh, this makes so much sense. It made so much sense to have the area outcomes and the learning outcomes separate if we can, because of the fact that we're trying to force them together. And if it doesn't work, that we just need to accept that they do something different than what we do in the classroom. But I do see overlap. So I'm working with the librarian right now for my history classes, so that she's going to track who's taken her INCO classes, which are how do you do research and how do you find primary sources. And then I'm going to try to find a way where I could attach my learning outcome to, did they actually do what they were taught in that course, and then have a measurement that way. So then we see the overlap of the learning outcome and the course, or something to that effect. But that's kind of where we're trying to go. But I see them now as two different areas. And I don't know if people agree, or I'd like to hear everybody else's feedback.
Yeah, we should have that. We need to have that discussion. One of the things that I'll get to you in a moment, Enrique. One of the thoughts that came to mind as I was listening to our speaker this morning is, I think that SLOs should be seen as means and not as ends, right? And I think that if a person or a faculty member or anyone, if people see them as ends rather than means, they're not going to necessarily, people who see them as means and people who see them as ends are going to be in conflict, right? Over what to do and how to do it. And it's hard to get people who see them as ends to change their mind and see them as means, and vice versa, perhaps. So in my mind, student learning outcomes are means to an end. What about service area outcomes? Aren't they more ends oriented, or are they also means oriented?
I would say service area outcomes could be means oriented, because if you learn how to put together like your degree plan and you worked with your counselor on how to put that together at a community college, then you now have the means to do that at a four-year institution, or even the means how to strategize and get ready for graduate school. Like, I think it's all about like teaching, like in our classes, everybody's classes who teach, we teach organization, we teach time management. And I think that's also what counselors are doing, is just with different tools. So if we could teach students to do that, they just need to pivot and use it within those areas. So I think we all do it. It's just that we all call them different things in our classrooms. My hope is that after a student meets with a counselor at a community college and financial aid at a community college or EOP&S, whatever, you know, the area they go to, that they now know to seek those areas out at a four-year institution. Like, they're using the knowledge they've learned at the community college to further their way within the four-year institution, and then to also like speak out and get mentors and further their way into higher education if that's their goal. But that's my understanding of it, and I could be wrong.
Enrique, what did you want to say?
Well, I think first of all, I think every institution is built different across California, especially if you're, large institutions like Fresno City College. At City College, we went back and looked at what is the goal, what is it that we want to accomplish. And we did separate the service unit outcome. You can call them whatever you want to call it. We call it service unit outcome, into the student services side. They do student services outcomes, library, financial aid, EOP&S, learning community programs, you name it. We do have embedded counselors. They do service unit outcomes. The programs also do SLOs, because there are programs, they're teaching courses, right? So the courses have SLOs. So it all depends what your goal is. And I say that because as an SLO coordinator, I do track both the SLOs for Fresno City College, and at the same time, I assist the student side portion of SEOs. Now, we did have SLOs in the student services side, like Tina mentioned, as a result, students will learn how to go to the counseling and schedule an appointment or whatever. They got rid of that and they made them into SEOs because they were more service oriented. That's what we call them, service unit outcomes. But it all depends what you want to do with them. And at the end of the day, it's, are they relevant? Because at the end of the day, we're focusing on student learning, right? And that's what it is. What are you going to do? If you have we call it service unit outcome. And so I met with the counselors, the administrators, directors of the program, and what is your goal? What is, and well, our goal is to, hire staff. Well, that's a goal. Let's gear down more to an outcome. And so the outcome is, it's how you wanted to define that program. If you want to focus on that learning side, you want to focus on the delivery side, student success, it's up to you, but what are you really measuring? And that's the nagging thing for a lot of institutions who are trying to implement these service unit outcomes and then collaborate with the SLOs. So we do collaborate. You have one coordinator, of course, collaborating with students' services and instruction. So there's a tide. Where we have a disconnect is where we have the business office. They don't do anything. I don't know. We have a police. It's a service render. Police. We have other offices that are in the bookstore. So we're trying to get them to do that stuff. Because for us, when you go through program review, you get funding, right? So program review is we're trying them to get them to do program review. But it's, it all really depends how your institution is structured. And of course, politics plays a role. I'm just VP, I don't want to do that type of stuff. So it all really depends, So thank you.
So thank you. So yes, obviously it does depend on the institution. I'm wondering if there's a good model out there of how this is working. I mean, I haven't been able to find anything specific. I found some information and some studies done on how SLOs and SAOs may correlate, but I don't know if it's being implemented anywhere. And I was hoping that in this session, someone would say, hey, we're doing this and we're doing it and we're paying for it properly. Again, it often comes down to money. Is anybody aware of a college that is able to sustain learning communities in a way that is as they are intended, rather than oftentimes learning communities are on my campus, for instance, they're tied to either race or ability or something along those lines. But I think that a learning community model, if it's applied across the college, if it's applied across all disciplines, would be really productive and meaningful. But there's no way to pay for it. Has anyone figured out how to integrate learning communities across their college in a sustainable way?
So are you asking more about funding, Steve? Because like, for example, at City College, within the faculty bargaining unit, we are responsible. All part-time faculty and full-time faculty are responsible to do assessments, no matter what. It's in your contract. Part-time faculty get extra compensation. So it is built into our system. So we don't have the argument or the problems that what you're just saying, if you're talking about funding. It is built into our system, and it's a faculty. You know, at the end if you say, Steve, that you're going to be doing 2 SLOs and you're going to be assessing them at the end of the semester, you're responsible to do that. So it is in our union also, and so once again, it's also depends on your union if you're talking about funding. But the funding for Fresno City College for part-time faculty, it's set and it's the models there.
Is there any way to look at is there any way for you to share those documents with us or that information with us? Would that be kosher? I mean, I'd like to see what the language is so that I know how to advocate for it properly on my campus.
It's local chapter union. It is written on the faculty bargaining agreement.
Is that stuff available to outsiders?
It is available. Okay. Chapter 1495. It just put State Center Community College District, and it's available in the public. All that's available. State Center Community College chapter. Yeah, AFT. We're part of the AFT. And so with that being said, now it also depends on your institution, you know, to follow, you know, those type of funding, you know, agreements within the faculty and the college. I think you can have it. You're going to having a hard time if you're especially a single college institution, and you have a, you know, president dash superintendent. Those, my experience, the tendency there, there's none.
Sacramento City College is one of 4, right, colleges in the Los Rios system, and that in itself causes all kinds of issues as well. When you have 4 different colleges doing 4 different things. Los Positas. Thank you, Michael. We'll check that out.
Yeah, there's 3 different ones mentioned for Las Positas there. This is Liz. Hi.
Hey, Liz. So, okay, great. And I'll also look at Fresno and see if I can find the information I'm after, Enrique. If I can't find it, I'll let you know. Maybe you can direct me to where I need to go.
Sure. Like even like right now, part-time faculty are getting paid from City College. I paid them to attend this. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
that's great. Those kinds of advantages don't exist necessarily across the board, right? And you're right, they're tied to union matters, union discussions, and stuff like that. One of the things I'm interested in trying to do, like I said, is creating these mentorship pods and having them instituted across the college. And I keep getting into, well, how is this going to be funded? How is this going to be funded? Who's going to be responsible for funding it? The student services side of the house or the academic side of the house? And it's a round and around discussion. Is there a way for the contract to actually allow for a separate funding stream that can just go directly into collaborative work? Does anyone have anything like that? Hi, Ann.
Hi, I'm from Las Positas. I'm sorry, I came
great.
in late. I was at another breakout session.
Great,
I wear
let's hear
lots
from
of
you.
hats. So I came in midstream, but I know in the latest contract for part-time instructors, there was a raise associated with the recognition of it takes time to complete their professional responsibilities. And assessments, slow assessments, was part of their professional responsibilities. So granted, it's hard to overcome that barrier because some interpretation is, well, I want to do something different for my professional responsibilities. But you don't get to pick and choose what your responsibilities are. You got to do your grading, you got to do your assessments and whatnot. But that's how our union recognized the work that part-timers do and their contribution to assessment. So they added that in the latest contract.
Let me ask you, Ann, in your contract, do you have, at your college, do you have healthy learning communities? Like across the college, do you have many of them across disciplines, or are they how do learning communities work at your college?
So I have 2 of my colleagues here, Liz and Michael, and they've kind of shared some of our learning communities. We also have Puente.
Yeah, we do.
We have Emoja. We have veterans. We have the ones they just listed, the engineering tech learning community, Actors Conservancy, but there's nothing in the contract. This was all kind of organic. People saw a need and developed the learning communities. And I'm not sure about the funding, maybe Michael or Liz. I'm not part of any of those learning communities, so I can't help you there.
With the engineering community, can we go back to that for a moment? The LPC engineering tech community, how is that populated? How do you determine which students are able to join that community?
I can speak to that a little bit. It was originally targeted toward our veteran students, our student veterans who participated in the veterans program, but it is open to anyone who wishes to participate. So I think we still have the majority of the students participating in that community come from the veterans population, but it's expanded to be available to anyone. I think, it's a successful community. It's what I think is also unique about it is that it has a very specific goal that it's not transfer. It's designed to help these students in this community get jobs directly out of this program. We have proximity to Livermore Lab, Sandia Lab, other labs in the area that the students complete internships as part of that process as well. So I think we're trying to leverage that in order to help our students move into those positions.
Do you have multiple instances of this learning community? Like, are there multiple classes or multiple? Or is there only one, or are there multiple ones? And do you create as many as you need?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it started off, yeah. So it is kind of like cohort based, but then in the sense that you have the veterans strong presence of it, right? So the veterans counselor, the veterans office will definitely help promote the program. We also have a classified support specifically for this program.
Yes, that's well. Exactly what I'm thinking about too.
Yeah, and so I think we have some of the courses the way they're set up. They will take them together. They're not even always during the regular semester times. The math in particular, they'll split up among in a different calendar, but it is open to everyone. So whereas it first started, I think it was exclusively for veterans. It then very quickly became more institutionalized and then open to everyone. I think where there is that extra support for the veterans might be building the connections for the internships, but as far as helping them become aware and streamlining how they navigate the process, there's a lot of support there. But anyone can take advantage of it if they are willing to follow the pathway. So as far as I think it's structured around, it's a 2-year program. So I think there's a new set of classes that start every year. So it would, but I don't believe every semester, it's every year. So
another logistical problem that I'm running into is in trying to create, let's say these mentorship pod learning communities. That's basically what they are. We're having trouble trying to determine, again, how to select the students for it. It sounds like, Michael, that the students are self-selecting to go into. They might be encouraged by the Veterans Office, but they're self-selecting to go into these communities and get that kind of support.
Yeah, that is currently the case. Yes.
Is there any? Does anyone know of another method? Is there any other way aside from self-selecting that? How can I ask this? So in the English discipline, for instance, which is what I teach, if I want to create a mentorship pod, how do I determine which students are going to fill that pod? Do I look at the lowest performing students and invite them into this pod through some influence of counseling or direct outreach? Do I open the pods up to any English major that wants to experience the pod, which would be my inclination? But if that's the case, how do I sustain these pods? Because there's going to be many of them. How do we pay for it? So on one side, there's these funding limitations. On the other side, there's these limitations of trying to determine who's in the pod. So are there any other methods out there aside from self-selecting as a former outreach specialist? Has anyone come up against an issue where so many students want to take something like this and there's just not enough courses or not enough learning communities to satisfy the student need? No. Well, I was really hoping that somebody here would have a working model that was different than the one I'm currently trying to deal with. It doesn't sound like that's the case. Anne?
This is I came here to see how you were going to merge SLOs and SAOs because I'm the SLO chair. And so this is outside of my realm of expertise and experience, but I know we struggle with the invitation part just in the biology department. We know there's certain student subpopulations that we want to attract to our department and to have more diversity. And we've talked about, you know, how do you invite these students? Do you get, you know, peer mentoring? How do you hook them up without offending anyone? And it's a struggle. I have no answers, but we've talked about it. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any answers either. This was supposed to be a roundtable discussion about ideas, and I don't have the answer myself. I'm looking for the answer. Here's the pathway for engineering tech. All right, Michael, thank you for that. I'll check it out.
And I know, for example, English instructors, when they're working with a learning community, there's no extra pay for it. It's just a passion, and they do it because they care about equity, and
right.
They, you know, they're redesigning the courses for success. You know, but maybe if we looked at our assessments, we wouldn't need so many learning communities. But yeah, I know if the faculty do it just on their own with passion.
Does any college that here, or do you know of a college in California or across the nation maybe that allows for collaborative time as part of the faculty's load? Because not ours either. I mean, that's part of the problem too, is trying to get everybody on the same page at the same time. All right, it's always so difficult to do. One of the things that I've tried to propose at my college is not only a definitive college hour that would occur from like 12 to 1, let's say on Tuesday and Thursday, making sure that there are no courses, no classes that are delivered during that hour is a challenge in and of itself. But if we had a definitive college hour where faculty were just allowed to collaborate without any other interference, I think that would go a long way in supporting this kind of work. And then the other thing is, well, then can we build such a demand into our contracts? Can we negotiate for collaborative time as part of our contract? That discussion hasn't begun yet on my campus, but I'm interested in learning whether or not other people have done this. It sounds like, Enrique, that you have sort of something like that for your part-timers, at least some recognition of their work through pay. But what about for full-timers?
Sorry, I'm moving from room to room. That's what I'm doing, sorry. So what was the question again, Steve?
So I'm wondering whether or not colleges have been able to matriculate collaborative time into their full-time faculty's teaching load. Because if we can have definitive, like for instance, on my campus, we're supposed to have a college hour from 12 to 1 on Tuesdays. It doesn't work out that way because there are courses that are taught that time and meetings that take place, and it's not really it's not a sacrosanct, it's not a special hour in any way. It's interfered with. If we could negotiate collaborative time, that might go a long way in supporting, you know, this learning community model. But then, is there a way to even fund that by matriculating learning collaborative time into our contracts? Is that even something that's ever been discussed before?
We do have that. Before we didn't have, but we do have that. It's in the contract too, which in the bylaws you see that every I'm just talking about full-time faculty now, talking about part-time. Full-time faculty, they have to work 35 hours a week, schedule hours. That goes with the classroom, your office hour, and then you have 5 hours that are not assigned. You can do whatever you want to do with them. Professional development, like today, whatever, on a Saturday, you meet with the, faculty.
Yeah, we have that too, and we have that too. That's as far as we've gotten as well.
That's as far as you've gotten, right? Okay. As far as the part-time, that's also on the part-time language. It's on the bylaws. That is specifically stated. You will get compensated for this and that. Now, what the part-time faculty are not don't do is they analyze the data, they gather the data and put it together and package it for a program review. That's for the full-time faculty or the department chair of a discipline to do. But the part-time faculty are required to do the assessments.
Our part-time faculty are not required to do assessments, SLO assessments. And that's been a real sticking point as well. It's been problematic, right? If everyone isn't doing these, then they don't become as important. Louisa had a comment in the chat where she mentioned, Louisa, did you want to share that with us?
Sure. Let me move my computer where you can't hear the background noise. But it is challenging. I'm a part-time faculty, and I've been part-time faculty for Fresno City College for 20 years, over 20 years. And it is very challenging because, we all know that the bulk of the instructors at a junior college, are part-time faculty. The full-time faculty, they have their meetings weekly, monthly, whatever. It depends upon their dean, what their dean is asking and requiring of them. And as you know, there are division meetings too that do occur. Part-time faculty are not always included or invited to some of these meetings. Why? I don't know. But it depends on the leader in your department whether or not they inform you of that information. I'm kind of bold in the sense that I want to be informed what's going to make me a better instructor. What's going to help me to know what's coming down the pike, what's already here that is needed, the tools that I need to be aware of or modifications that need to be done. I teach in the allied health department, and so that's medical. So there's always things changing. But, I'm fortunate enough to where in my department, I'm informed about things. So, but yet there are times when things do occur that I'm not included because I'm part-time. Whether that's done intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's done intentionally. I think the school of thought has always been whenever you have meetings and decisions and to be made, it's generally full-timers that make that. And then it gets decimated, if you have someone in that area who is good about sharing that information with the part-time faculty. So that's been my experience for over 20 years.
I think that's a very common experience, Louisa.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. And especially if do you ever work directly with a counselor with your students?
Yes. Okay. Oh yes, I have. Again, I'm pretty bold, and I want to be a resource for all of my students. So since I teach in the allied health area, dental hygiene, medical assisting, HIT, respiratory care, In fact, this last semester was the first time, and I teach 100% online now. This was the first semester I had more than 5 students contact me about psychological issues. One of them was in The Verge, and so gave this student direct link to someone in our psychological department, because these are free services to them, and a phone number, and then provided them other information about other services that are available to our students, only because I've always made it my duty to be aware of these things, because when I was going through hygiene, there was at one point where I didn't even have enough money to buy milk for my children. So I know what it's like to be in their shoes. So I wish that I would have known of some of these things that are available, because I could have benefited from it. So I make that my duty. So anyway, the bottom line is that a lot of times it has to do with the mentality, the mindset of the part-time faculty as well. Are they going to make that effort to be aware of the amenities that are available to the instructor as well as the students? Okay. And then too, it's also, it has to do with the department in which they work in. Sometimes some departments, don't share. Some of them do. And, it depends upon the individual. Do they want to take that step forward, that leap forward, and find out, where can I get information? How can I be part of this loop of information that's disseminated that generally, full-timers are only aware of? So, yeah, and it is a common ailment, shall we say, for part-time faculty.
Yeah, very much.
And
Enrique?
we have some, we have excellent part-time faculty, but they're not aware of some of the amenities that are available to them as faculty, and especially our students, to help them to be successful.
Yes, a very common problem. Enrique, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Lisa. I think you're one of the exceptional part-time faculty. All are. I think we have like 1,200 part-time faculty, Steve.
Wow.
1,500, something like that, 1,200. But Luisa, anything that if it's in your part-time agreement, if the department chair, full-time faculty do decide to, get you involved, you need to get compensated for that. I don't know if you know that, or you're aware of that. Or if you say you I want to contribute to the peer review writing or whatever, the external accreditation writing. It's not all part-time faculty want to do that, because they teach different institutions. But if you do that, you should get compensated. One of the reasons why I say is part-time faculty get paid for SLOs, because I went straight to the administration. They will get paid. They need to learn. Because how else are you going to teach them? Part-time faculty come in and you're mandated by the union to do your assessments, but you haven't been trained. So one of the reasons as well, I want them to get trained and paid. So.
Right. So Enrique, I am aware, that there are compensations, but what I'm saying is that there's information that is discussed with full-timers that should be disseminated to part-time faculty that are teaching the same courses or teaching in the same discipline.
Yeah, that's a discipline by discipline or dean by dean issue, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that, that is a huge problem, because, as Enrique just pointed out, what's the percentage of part-timers versus full-timers? You see, and so, if there's more part-timers, we want to make sure that they are receiving the information too, so that all of those courses are taught appropriately, and that they, their mindset, they are aware of things that affect them and affect their teaching. For example, sometimes there's technology changes, that needs to be disseminated to faculty as well.
Let me move the discussion a little bit. Another issue that has come up through my conversations about shared space, let's say, between SLOs and SAOs, is some counselors have said to me that they think that this is problematic because SAOs often have to do with student health concerns, mental health concerns, stuff that shouldn't be revealed or talked about in a more public space, right? So how do we go about respecting the privacy of students, but also integrating SAOs into a more classroom setting? Has that been an issue for anybody? Has anybody run into those kinds of issues? Do you know what I'm asking? Okay, maybe not. Enrique.
What can you rephrase your question again? Maybe it's
if we are going to try and deliver student learning outcomes and student and service area outcomes in the same space, does that ever become problematic because service area outcomes are usually around health matters, mental health concerns, issues that may not be conducive for public conversation? So how do you have, has anybody run up against privacy issues when it comes to delivering SAOs?
Well, it depends what the, for us, service unit outcome is. We have a psychological program at City College. I think the first accredited program in the state, and they have their own building, their own department, they share space with other programs, but they're having those discussions. They don't want to share the space because there's a lot of confidentiality.
Yes.
And so they're having those talks right now. I know when I was their administrator, I was up there, and they're having the conversations, and then it's reflected on the service unit outcomes. And when they do the external report, and then they do the program review, they write it. Here's our obstacles. Here's our our pros and cons in delivering our services as a psychological service, mental health, whatever. And cases that happen within the program, but I think it goes back again. It goes back to the what is the goal of that institution. Psychological service belongs to student services. They report to the vice president of student services, and then you have that director of psych services. So it's within the director, and to have these conversations. Look, we have data. We have analyzed our services. We want to move our SEOs indicate this data, this analysis. Therefore, and then that's how you make decisions. You do an action plan. We have an action plan where you do an action plan. You go through a program review. The program review committee gives you, a recommendation, and then you create an action plan that, to either move the program if we have the funding or we have the space. Once again, I think every college space is limited. I mean, you're going to have that. Space is really limited.
Well, I'm wondering if a lot of what I'm imagining can just actually take place in virtual space, which before COVID, I would never have said, because I'm not a fan of online teaching and learning. I'm still not, but I do see that there's potential benefits, and the space issue is solved, right? So the other thing that I'm getting is that it sounds like it's really important to make sure that the contract reflects part-time work. In other words, putting into the contract that part-timers should be responsible for the assessments, the SLOs. That sounds like a good start. And also making sure that part-time work is being valued properly by paying them for their contributions. those are two very good places to start. I think there are some holes in our current contract. But I'm still having a problem trying to figure out how to fund everything. I'm not really sure how to fund these learning communities in a way that is sustainable. I just keep getting that issue comes up again and again and again. The learning community is sustainable in a small way. In other words, we can do Umoja, we can do Puente, but we can't do it for every student across the college. It's just impossible. Enrique, did you have something else to say?
And it's we're the opposite. We're trying to get rid of that. Now that's not we're trying to get rid of those programs, but it really goes back to how do you move the needle? I mean, you have the Puente program, and Puente program could have 30 to 45 students in a program. Are you really moving the needle? Instead of
right,
having,
exactly.
So my thinking, and I said it a long time ago, why not have a multicultural center, put those programs together into one center? Now you're helping, instead of helping 45 students in the program, now you're moving the needle and helping 5,000, 10,000 students into a multicultural center. And instead of having a special program, what do you call them special programs? What do you call them special programs? We used to call them special programs. Come student success programs.
Right. Okay.
We have the Simba, the Puente, I can go on. We have so many programs. We come learning communities. But you really, you're asking yourself that question. It's really, as an SLO coordinator, it feels like you're working by yourself, because now you have the guided pathways coordinator, you have the program review coordinator, you have the curriculum coordinator, you have the SLO coordinator, and God forbid, or the equity coordinator. Are they really talking together and working together? That is the number one question that you have. Are they really working together to accomplish whatever goal? Because if you're working on silos, that's going to be a brutal problem. It's a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, I've only had this job ever since COVID started, so my entire experience with it has been very siloed. Yeah, and I think that needs to change. I think we're out of time, right? People, it's at 11:03. I don't know why we've don't they want us back at 11? Or am I wrong?
It's time is for break.
Time for break?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, people, for being here. I'm sorry it wasn't more informative. And I'm going to I suppose I just end the session for us.
Could I just say one thing before you end?
Yeah, sure, Louisa.
I hope I didn't sound negative. Everything has to do with your dean of your department and the directors in that department. You know,
and that's problematic because from dean to dean, you're going to have different standards, expectations, and desires, right? And I think that's part of the problem is that there's no standardization of how faculty are dealt with, both full and part-time faculty.
Right, throughout the whole entire campus. I've been really fortunate. The dean I work under tries to keep us as much informed as possible, meaning part-timer. And then I have a director in the dental hygiene program that I still work closely with that kind of keeps me abreast of things. So again, it's an individual thing. Do you want to put your foot forward and get a little bit more involved and keep informed? Or, do you want to stay in your cocoon? But it is an illness, shall we say, that part-time faculty historically and continually remain uninformed of things, and they're just as viable as a full-time faculty, and they need to be, kept abreast of things as well. Anyway, so we all have the same mindset to do the very best that we can. We all want our students to succeed, and we want to succeed too as instructors to present the material effectively in a way that we meet the learning styles of all of the students, right? So that they can learn the information quicker, so they can retain it longer, and then they're able to recall it quicker during times of emergency. For me, in the healthcare, if there's a medical emergency, they'll remember exactly what to do. So I think we all have, regardless if you're part-time or full-time, we all have the same focus of doing the very best that we can. But we do all have obstacles to overcome.
Very true. Thanks,
Thank you.
Louisa, for that closing statement. Take
You're
care,
very
everybody.
welcome.
I'll see you guys in the lobby in a moment. I'm hoping. I'm going to end the session now.